This is the story of how I, your humble host, was laid off. I don't just talk about the dangers of losing an income, I lived it. This particular day is why I advocate so hard for earning our own income. Anyway, this is what happened as I remember it to me one Friday in 2011. The year was 2011, and life was pretty good for me. I couldn't complain about much. I had a decent paying job, a great place to live, a nice vehicle to drive, and a good circle of friends. What was there to complain about? I would come home from work, look around at my place and the things that I've acquired, and literally ask, what's there to complain about? You know, that's the thing about life. Just when you thought you had it all figured out, it changes up on you. I've been working at my job for the last few years, and I was getting used to the routine. I came into work on a normal Friday morning, and I noticed that something was different. Just a little off. I can't explain it exactly, but it was something eerie. It's like when people talk about bad energy, it just seemed off. Maybe it was too quiet in there. Maybe it was lasagna I had the night before. I couldn't be sure as to what it was, but it was definitely something. And it's something I noticed right away. As I walked in, it appeared that my coworkers were all reluctant to look up from their computers or work phones. Now that wasn't the norm. Normally when I walk in, my coworkers are jovial. You can walk in without hearing an enthusiastic good morning or hello, but not on this morning. I made it to my desk as I usually do, put my car keys and phone down, and I logged into my computer. That's when I saw it. I saw it out of the corner of my eye. One of the managers was busy taking items off a coworker's desk and placing them into a plain brown, medium-sized cardboard box. It was happening again. This scene was all too familiar to me. It happened at the same company 2 years prior. The way I remember it 2 years ago, well, it's not so much that I remember it, it's that I can't forget it. It's one of those experiences that you're completely unprepared for, one that gets burned into your consciousness. A member of Human Resources would call an employee on their desk phone and ask them to come to HR. Now, when I first saw this, of course I'm thinking, no big deal. It's perfectly normal for a Human Resources department to call an employee to come in first thing in the morning, right? That's when I began to justify what I was seeing. Well, maybe there was a problem with their address or tax paperwork. That's what I was thinking when it first went down 2 years ago. But that sort of optimism, well, that was quickly replaced with a cold, hard dose of realism. While the unfortunate employee was heading towards the HR department, their immediate manager or one of the managers would stealthily and with precision come behind them and place all of their items in a plain brown, medium-sized cardboard box. It was so coordinated, so precise. It was done with military-like precision. After seeing this for the first time, my immediate reaction was, now you don't see that every day. At this point, I'm still in the justification phase, oblivious to what's happening. Then, a few minutes later, another phone call at another desk, and somebody else gets up, walks out the door, and like clockwork, their belongings are scooped up, and into a box they go. Now, at that point, no matter how hard I tried to keep it out, realism crept in. This was happening. Layoffs. I survived the layoffs of 2 years ago. But this particular Friday, somehow this felt different. It was as if that eerie feeling that I experienced when I walked in was some sort of harbinger. Maybe that's a little dramatic, harbingers, bad energy, eerie feelings, I get it. But at the time it was happening 2 years ago, you see a person get a call, they'd get up, walk out, management would come behind them with a plain brown medium-sized cardboard box, and you never see them again. Just like that, they were gone. The episode of 2 years ago lasted until about lunchtime or 12 noonish. That's a solid 4 hours of complete anxiety. Needless to say, that was a stress-filled day. What made it so stressful was the randomness. It lacked the structure. Normally, if you see a person lose their job, you can usually see it coming. You know, the person that's always late or lives to rock the boat, it's not a surprise. But when one of my coworkers, Sue, when Sue got the call, the same Sue that would bake sweets for the group, organize holiday-themed parties, the Sue who was always on time, the Sue who never rocked the boat, The Sue that always had a kind word to say to anyone, along with a friendly demeanor. When Sue got the call, that's when it became real. Because if she wasn't safe, nobody was. During that 4-hour period 2 years ago, there wasn't any chatting. Nobody went to use the restroom or get a drink of water. We all stayed glued to our computer screens, like it was some sort of shield that was going to protect us from what was happening. I would occasionally look around, but when I did, I only saw another victim. That's an extremely helpless feeling, to be sitting there, unable to move, while hoping that the crosshairs aren't fixed on you next. Every phone call became panic-inducing. Was this it? Was this a call that could potentially upset my life? We became afraid of our phones. This went on for 4 hours. But of course, as good employees, we're expected to work normally with all the chaos going on around us. But who could work under these circumstances? 1 minute, you're gainfully employed, thinking about where you're going to binge watch for the upcoming weekend. The next, you could be out of a job, wondering how you're going to make your car payment. Yeah, for me, no work was getting done. During the lunch hour of the layoffs of 2 years ago, a few of the remaining employees got together and went to a local restaurant. Don't get me wrong, nobody had an appetite. Not a single person ordered any food. Well, there was one person who decided that if they were going to go out, it wasn't going to be sober. So they did that. But for the rest of us, we had waters with lemon. The time was used more like a counseling session. Plus, at the time, we didn't know that the proverbial bloodshed was over. Now, this is the benefit of hindsight. At that lunch, there were a lot of gasps, head shaking, and confused looks as we compared notes on what we saw and what we knew. We compiled a list of who survived from the other departments and who didn't. We contacted some of the dearly departed, and that was a phrase we coined during that lunch to refer to some of the recently let go employees. We were hoping to get some sort of answers to the myriad of questions each of us had, but none of the dearly departed picked up their phones during that lunch break. Not even Sue. During traumatic events, and I'd say this would qualify as a traumatic experience, certainly not on the level of others, but definitely on the spectrum, people start to morph. But where I was sitting at the table, I could see the transformation begin to happen in real time. I noticed 4 distinct types, and they were all displayed in the people sitting at the table. First, there was a guy who talked about lawsuits, promising if he were to get terminated, he'd contact his cousin's best friend's stepdad, who was a lawyer. And of course, he'd sue them. For what? I don't know. I don't think he got that far in his thought process, but there was a lot of bravado with him. Saying things like, I wish they would fire me. Why? I own this place. They can't do this. It's illegal. He was the one taking the shots, but you probably were able to figure that one out. Then there was a conspiracy theorist. The one who had always known something like this would happen. He just wasn't privy to the when part, but that didn't stop him from searching for clues after the fact. He sat at the table constantly shaking his head, and he would mumble things like, see, I knew it. And he'd follow it up with random happenings in an attempt to make his worldview make sense. Like, remember 2 weeks ago when we got an email, and that email said, have a nice weekend? Right then. They knew it, and I missed it. Then there were the panics. A group of people who thought that this meant the end of their life as they knew it. The ones whose identity revolved around where they worked, what they did, and how much they earned. They were concerned about how they would break the news to their family members. The last group, I call the nonchalants. These are the people who were already preparing their resume for the next employment opportunity. They were steadfast that it was not a big deal if they lost their jobs. They even contemplated whether or not they would return to work after lunch. Even though they said it wasn't a big deal, it was lunchtime, and they were drinking waters with lemon just like the rest of us. Well, like most of us. For me, I didn't know what to feel. I guess I felt a little like all the groups in some ways. But that's what happens when you have a group of people who've been sufficiently shaken. Strangeness abounds. There was more than a little speculation taking place at that lunch. Since we didn't have any answers, that's all we could do. But after lunch, we got some of those sought-after answers from management. It happened at a company-wide meeting. All the remaining employees were required to attend. The meeting took place in the auditorium we would usually use for fun stuff, like rolling out a new program or a new plan, or company-paid lunches. Something generally good. But not this meeting. There were no sandwich platters on the stage that day. This meeting was to mitigate what the remaining employees had just went through. Now, before lunch 2 years ago, the company had about 150 employees. At this particular impromptu meeting, there were about 30. During the meeting, we were assured that mistakes like this, they were all made by the upper management. We were told it had nothing to do with our performance, our metrics. It was just their mistakes. We were promised that those type of mistakes were a one-off and wouldn't happen again. They told us that they had plans to rebuild the company with the help of the remaining employees, or the core employees as they put it. It almost had the feeling of a doomed pep rally. You know, the ones where the people on the stage are trying to get the people off the stage excited, but the people off the stage didn't trust the people on the stage. It was a real mess. At the end of the meeting, the remaining employees clapped for the people on the stage. Because of that applause, the people on the stage probably thought they got through to the people off the stage, but they didn't. We were just all scared. We didn't want to lose our jobs. We probably would have clapped if they had told us they were eliminating the lunch hour. I couldn't help but notice everyone in upper management who was there before the lunch was also there after the lunch. You know, the ones that took full responsibility for the events that just unfolded? Not a single person from upper management had to pay for their mistakes with their jobs. Not a single one. But Sue had to. And so did many others. Now, how's that for morale? The people on the stage can mess up royally, but the people off the stage are going to have to pay for it. As I sat there thinking about the events of 2 years ago, one of my coworkers, a newer hire, one of my cubicle mates, mouthed, "What the hell is going on?" I told her, "This happened 2 years ago and everything will be okay." I probably shouldn't have told her not to worry and everything will be okay. If you've ever taken a first aid class, you're taught when helping someone in need, never say, "everything will be okay." Because you don't know if everything will be okay. And I didn't know. I really didn't. I was hoping everything would be okay, especially for her. She had been my cubicle mate for just under 2 months. She was placed there after she completed her month-long training. Now, as cubicle mates, you talk. I knew she had just gotten this job, and she, as well as her 2 kids, were counting on the income. But I also knew what the company was capable of. I remember Sue. I looked around as managers hurriedly placed items in boxes and scurried out the door. Another one gone. I tried hard to concentrate more on what was on my computer screen and less on the chaos that was going on around me. I remember thinking, I just need to make it to lunch. Around 10 a.m., I received a call at my desk. Our desk phones had 2 lights on them. Both of the lights are red. Now, if a call was coming from an outside line, only one of the lights would shine. But if the call originated from an inside line, then both lights would illuminate. On this call, both of the lights were illuminated. I looked at the screen to see who was calling, and sure enough, it was from Human Resources. I answered the phone. I knew what was happening. I don't remember exactly what they said, but I knew what they wanted. As I made my way to HR's office, I said my goodbyes to several people. My cubicle mate had her hand over her mouth in disbelief as I walked out the door. When I finally made my way to HR's office, there were 2 people in that little room. The vice president of the company, who was seated behind the desk, and my direct manager, who was seated to the left next to the desk. I'd never been to the Human Resources office before, and I remember thinking, I imagine it being bigger. A third manager later joined us. He was carrying an empty, plain brown, medium-sized cardboard box. I smiled a little on the inside as I was handed the empty cardboard box. After the events of 2 years ago, I decided never to keep any personal items at my desk. Everywhere I would go, I'd take my phone and my car keys. I was thinking, I wasn't going to be like everybody else. When they got their boxes, they would be packed. Pictures, books, plants, water bottles. They had everything. If I was going to be given a plain brown medium-sized cardboard box, it was going to be an empty one. I was asked to take a seat in one of the 2 chairs that were facing the desk. I politely declined, saying I preferred to stand. I mean, what was the point? I knew what was about to happen. Why would I sit down and just have to get up again? The vice president of the company said, "Today is your last day working here." When I heard that, my body reacted faster than my mind could stop it. I immediately headed for the now closed door. This was all involuntary. Well, maybe involuntary is a bad word to use. I'll say it was reflexive. No thought was given to this action. I remember I even surprised myself with the move. What was going through my mind at the time was, what more could we possibly talk about? I was just told I wasn't going to be working here anymore, so why would I need to stick around and listen to some guy talk? A guy who was no longer my vice president, and I was no longer a subordinate to. To me, he was just a guy talking behind a desk in a small, stuffy room. That's what I was thinking. On my way to the door, which was just a few steps away, the vice president called my name to stop me. I turned around and he informed me that there was a severance check, a payroll check, an unused vacation time check. That's when I started to think, they must have had this ordeal planned for quite some time. Because a few months ago, I tried to use my vacation time, but they denied me. Now it all makes sense. See, now I sound like a conspiracy theory guy. I was told all I had to do to receive my checks was to sign some sort of release. Okay. Normally I'd read what I was signing, but when you've just been sitting for 2 hours, you're anxious, you're afraid of your phone, you're contemplating your financial future, you're seeing people disappear, not knowing your fate as it hangs in the balance, then you get a call you've been dreading all morning. You don't read, you just sign. And that's what I did. To this day, I don't know what I signed. They can own the naming rights to my firstborn for all I know. I signed the paperwork and received all of my checks. All total, just over $4,000. Oh, and I got to keep my medical insurance for 1 month. Yippee. Overall, not a good day. With my car payment, my rent, and my bills, I figured that $4,000 should last me just about 2 months. My ride home, I was thinking to myself, what am I going to do now? Little did I know, this was the beginning of a long, long journey.